Our school board meeting. We will continue with the approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approves. We'll move to public comment. I'll briefly read the guidelines. Public comment is a time for community to address the board with comments and questions. We ask that you have those comments limited to 5 minutes. We'll notify you when your time is up. There's a total of 30 minutes for public comment. And for comments and questions requiring a follow-up response, the board president or superintendent will follow up. So we have George Wilson.
Good evening. I filled out the new survey, and to be blunt, I didn't like it. Question 2 has too many responses which are rich and loaded. It kind of reminded me of the GLC survey. It's hard to know what one response means relative to another, and it makes me think that question 2 could be more simple and direct, maybe even broken down into a number of questions. Now, I know it's not that easy to write a survey, but that was just my impression for what it's worth. Also, I really hope that you've taken action to get more responses than you got from the last survey, because that was disappointing to say the least. The other subject I would like to talk about is Comprehensive Sex Education Bill 818. First things first, Mr. Carey, you said, the law requires that school districts implement a comprehensive health education program. I don't know whether we're playing word games with sex and health, but I don't think that is true. That it is true that we have to implement this new sex education as implied. Pritzker himself stated that the new sex education standards are voluntary. As a district, we can opt out of this new program. Indeed, the majority of school districts in DuPage County and Illinois as a whole have opted out of the new sex education. I can only find 4 school districts in DuPage County that have opted in. We do have a choice. The bill talks about national sex education standards. It's just a name. They are not national standards. No other state has signed up to these standards. Here's a quote from Monica Klein, a previous Planned Parenthood sex education instructor. By looking at the standards and resources the national sex education standards provide, states who encourage adoption of this content are advocating for the abuse of our children by exposing our kids to obscene sexual notions and inappropriate ideas for their age. Put simply, they are enticing and grooming our children for sexual activity. Let us not forget, the age of consent in Illinois is still 18 years old. I would like to encourage parents to look up CUSD, that's SIECUS, the company that produced this program. They are part of the DIE industry, diversity, inclusion, equity, and they boasted in their 2018 annual report that they weaponize sex to combat pro-life messages and disseminate its sexual advocacy agenda. I don't have anything to add on that. I just want Westmont taxpayers to know where their hard-earned dollars are going. I know this is not a question and answer, but I am curious to know whether any of the board members have actually read the bill and know what is in it. Section 5D of the bill mentions monies and grants. It appears there will be financial incentives to implement this curriculum. Is that the case? And if not, then what on earth is Section 5D talking about? Sections of the bill could be credited to the Illinois Ministry of Truth. The phrase, age and developmentally appropriate, appears just before content that is anything but. It appears to be bringing sex education right down into the K grade. The second thing that stood out to me is that the curriculum is said to be based on science and medicine. It is not. It is not based on science and medicine. It is just a way to get gender ideology into schools. I've presented some information that I have found. I am happy to be corrected on any points. You, as the school district, have said next to nothing about the new sex education curriculum. I don't think that's because you're trying to sneak it through without anyone noticing. I'm not that cynical. What seems more likely is that you, as a board, have not read through the bill and are relying on Mr. Carey's advice, which you will rubber stamp. One final point. This new sex education will require more of our students' time, so much of which is already taken up with DIE subjects like social emotional learning. The last scorecard I can see for this school says that we have a 52% math proficiency rate. I remember last year Mr. Carey presented some alarming figures on the deterioration of literacy for Miller School, which no one seemed to pick up on. Our kids lost a year in schooling. We are playing catch-up with our surrounding areas. 52% math proficiency rate. Almost half of our students leave Westmont schools without being proficient in maths. We should be focusing on the basics and not adding more stuff and ideology to class time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move along. We don't have any further comments. We'll move to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. 1, personnel recommendations. Sarah Payne, literacy teacher, WJHS. Nicole Stancy, Miller kindergarten teacher. Stephanie Glito, Miller first grade teacher. Janet Lockridge, long-term sub-counselor, Westmont High School. Bridget Litt-Martin, social worker. Jessica Zielinski, school psychologist. Amy Strobe, long-term sub-science, Westmont Junior High School. Colleen Alexander, nurse, Manning. Jennifer Thompson, assistant band director, Westmont High School. Adam McDaniel, sophomore boys basketball coach, Westmont High School, and resignations. 2, certification of hazardous crossing. 3, board authorization of vehicle use. 4, approval of additional July 2022 expenditure report. 5, approval of student tour request, athletics.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Marin?
Yes.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Ms. Steckity?
Yes.
Ms. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
We'll move along to information and discussion. The first item is our IASB superintendent search.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to have just a few moments tonight. I really mostly wanted you to be able to put a face with a name. My name's Patricia Vineyard, and I will be assisting Mr. Al Mulby in the superintendent search, the process which you know has already begun. I was filling in for another colleague whose wife had surgery the evening that Al came here, and so I was unable to be here the night of the presentation. And so I didn't want it to proceed any further without you knowing who I am. I'm in my, I think, 42nd year in education, all in Illinois. I've been an elementary principal. I started as a teacher. I've been a high school teacher and an elementary teacher, a general and special education teacher, been a principal, been an assistant superintendent for a small high school district, been an assistant superintendent for a very large 7,000 K-12 district, and then in 2013 came up to this area, superintendent of LaGrange Highlands. And so that's just a little bit about me. Mr. Mulby sends his greetings. I think pretty much you all know him or know of him. The other thing, I wanted to thank Mr. Carey and Shannon for all the work that they have done already. There's a lot of behind the scenes and things that we interface on, and so thank you for your attention, and apologize for the additional work this brings, but it's important work, and I appreciate it. So I had shared with Shannon, and I believe you all have a copy of the timeline that Al and I worked on. And so very briefly, I just wanted to sort of say where we are, where we're going, and then see if there were any questions, and then I will leave you. So basically right now we're at the part where we're gathering information so we can put together the formal announcement. It's an electronic brochure. We will probably give you a few paper copies for your files, but essentially it's an electronic brochure. And in there, there's a lot of information about the district. So as somebody who sought a superintendency, I can tell you that this announcement of vacancy is very, very important, because it's, if you don't know, if you don't live around here or live close by, and even if you perhaps are in the Chicago suburbs but just don't know a lot about your district, it's your first impression of the district and what you're looking for in your superintendent. So there's financial information, there's a little bit of information about board members, how long they have served. There's information on everything from a synopsis of curriculum, information about transportation and food service and what's your website and where you're located and a variety of things. Also in that is one of the columns in the brochure is the type of candidate sought. What are the traits and characteristics that this particular board is looking for in their next superintendent? We will come to that, we will tease that out and shape that up based on the survey that's going on right now. So staff members, parents, if you post it on your website, community members can fill that out. Board members have a separate link, they're filling it out. It was made available in an alternative, I think Spanish also, I believe. So that will continue through the 16th, and then Al and I will come back on the 23rd, and we will give you a summary of the results of the surveys and then a draft of the announcement of vacancy. Shannon asked a great question when we were chatting before the meeting about what that means, announcement of vacancy, because we've already technically announced it statewide and nationwide. It's listed on the IASA Job Bank, and that is where educators across the state and nation who are interested in Illinois, that's where they go to get information, and it's listed on the IASB Our website. That's what we call the preliminary posting, because what's not there right now is that document I'm talking about that gives specifics. What are you looking for in your next superintendent on some of the other dates? So sort of two waves of announcing, and the first one's done. There are folks who have already started the application process. I think that you know, you're going to be very pleased, I believe, with the slate of candidates brought forward. Your district has such a great reputation, and it certainly has a wonderful location. So we'll be back at the end of August, your August 23rd meeting. And then something that Mr. Carey and Shannon and I will work together on, that they will work with administrators on, is finding dates and times for those focus groups. So we will have a series of focus groups. I will facilitate those. Each will be about an hour. It can be a little less if there's a certain reason why we need it to be less, like a part of a Teachers Institute day or a before-after-school opportunity for teachers. And then usually there's one or two in the evening that we invite parents to. And I will present that summary information also in open session. And that information is very helpful, it's very informative, and a lot of times it will help drive questions that the board will incorporate into the interview process. And then I think Al probably did a great job of explaining the rest of the process, but I will stop talking at this point and just simply ask if you have any questions for me.
I have some questions. So first, the survey was launched on the 4th of August, right?
Correct.
And the deadline for completion of the survey is the 16th of August. So tomorrow is the halfway point. How many responses do we have so far?
I meant to jot those numbers down before I came. I need to get those from our administrative assistant. I will have those sent to Shannon first thing in the morning, and she'll share those with you or through Mr. Carey.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Because I think that one of the things that we talked about as a board a number of times leading up to the launching the search, or even finding someone to do the search or help us with the search, was the need to get community involvement and get as much feedback from the community as we possibly could. And so I guess I have a second question. I don't know if it's for you or for the school district or both, but that is, what are we doing to promote the existence of the survey? And because what I've seen so far as not a board member, but as a community member, has been an email, one email announcing the launching of the survey. And I'm just wondering, what other channels are we announcing this through, and what are we doing to maximize participation?
Great questions. And so typically it is more at the district level. We provide language for that initial email. And then sometimes there is just a flood of response. It really depends on the community. And if, often though, typically what a district will do is promote it through their other social media avenues. So if you have a large Facebook following and or a large Twitter following or what have you, and would be, and we did this when I retired, and we used IASB to find my replacement, was we sent out a couple of additional reminders. We're, 1 more week or 8 more days or 4 more days. So just those reminders, and just to say, really want your input. It's a very short survey. And I can certainly provide that language should you need it, but it's pretty, it's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. But I would say just additional reminders, and then the avenues that you typically have good success in reaching parents, like the other social media avenues.
So I guess then my next is more of a comment or a request to the school district. I think it would be good if we amplified this a little bit more. I know that no one likes to get emails in their inbox every single day, and there's especially this time of year with the school starting, and so many emails that I'm sure are going out on all kinds of topics. But let's not spare any effort in publicizing this as much as we can. And then another question I have about the process here is the focus groups. I know that the times are TBD, or the dates are TBD, but in theory, those focus groups should be happening between the 16th and the 23rd, or am I misunderstanding the timeline?
Yeah, not necessarily. Sometimes if it tends to be a little more doable to do the focus groups prior to the announcement of vacancy being shaped up, if it's occurring during the school year, because it's easier to find opportunities that teachers are already all together. So there's we'll have an after school, a couple of different days. We'll have an after school opportunity for teachers, or they have a built-in PLC time, or we say I'll sit in the faculty lounge. Teachers can drop by on their planning periods. When it's this time of year, it's sometimes more difficult to get all of those completed before the announcement of vacancy. And that's okay. A lot of my colleagues don't even try to do the focus groups prior to the announcement of vacancy. That really will be driven by the survey. The results of the focus groups are an important opportunity, additional opportunity for people to express their views about what is going well in the district, what challenges would, in their estimation, lie ahead for the district, for the board, for the superintendent, the kinds of characteristics, if they were looking for the superintendent, what kind of person, skills, or traits would they be looking for? So whether, regardless of when that happens, people tend to really appreciate that opportunity. And I always remind them and tell them, this is an additional piece. IASB has a standard search, and then there are some additional pieces that boards can select. And your Board of Education selected this focus group piece, and that just tells me how much they're interested in community feedback, that they want as much input as possible. So I always make sure they know that how important this is to the board, and that it's not just standard that we do it in every search. And so that synthesized information, we code for themes. That is important for the board to have. Not necessarily prior to the closing or prior to the announcement of vacancy occurring, but prior to you starting to interview, because often that feedback drives interview questions, gives you a little wider lens to think about those candidates as they walk through the door. And I'll give an example of a really resounding piece of feedback that came from staff and parents somewhere else in the state with focus groups that we had done, that the board found surprising, didn't realize there was a disconnect, and they were so happy to have this information, and it had to do with communication out of central office, and in particular from the superintendent that they had at the time, who had and has many wonderful qualities, but there was really a disconnect with communication, and to the place where it was becoming a little bit of a problem. So that really caused the board to rethink some questions they were going to ask of the candidates, reference questions when they called references, some information they were going to get from the current folks, either superintendent if it was an assistant superintendent, or board members if they were a sitting superintendent. So it will drive your lens for interviewing and considering the kind of person who you want to name. I hope that helped.
It helps. What I'm looking for is an understanding of when, in particular, because I think the focus groups are more than just community. It's also people that are already in the district,
Staff.
working.
So I apologize if I misunderstood. Timing is really your question?
Yeah, my question is, can we get a sense of timing, or maybe can we commit to by the next board meeting having at least a window? If we don't have dates set, like, 'cause here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I know that there are people that watch these board meetings. They don't come to the meetings, they watch them online.
Right.
Or maybe they watch the replay or whatever. And for any, in general terms, for any community member who would like to participate in the focus groups, knowing in general when those, maybe the week that we expect to do it, or the 2-week period in which we expect to do it, would be helpful for them to plan for it, and as far in advance as we can give that notice, the better likelihood we'll have a higher participation in those focus groups as well.
Thank you for, sorry you had to reiterate your point. Well made, and yes, absolutely. So very soon, I think those conversations have begun. Typically for the majority of, or for many aspects of the search, the board president or his or her designee is a key contact. For focus groups, it's typically more at the district level. So the superintendent, the superintendent's assistant, executive assistant, and so those talks have begun. And I think that, I know you had mentioned that tomorrow you were going to be having a conversation. I will tell you that they will be soon, and I know that's not a window. I would say I would like to see them by mid to late September, so they will be early in the school year. The dates are going to be determined very soon, and then I will give you language to go ahead and actually the invitation to go ahead and put out early, get it on people's minds, have principals incorporated into back to school nights, reminders. If you have and sometimes they're even built into opportunities like that because they don't take a lot of time. We can get a wealth of information in 45 to 60 minutes. So if there is already a back to school night or some event night that's one of your larger schools that you already know you're going to get a lot of parents, we can incorporate into that even. We would talk about the kind of space we would need. So it will be in the next month. The date will be decided soon, and we will give information about making, wording to make sure that word gets out.
Just to paraphrase you, you don't expect them to happen in August. You expect them to happen in September. Is that correct?
That's up to the
I think-
district.
Yeah, so
I think the earliest.
It's up to the
Carlos,
district.
would be that last week of August,
Okay.
would be the earliest. We're starting the school year next week. And so like you're looking at the week of the 22nd would be the earliest, and then extending into the beginning of September.
I have sent August and September dates that are not good for me, so August is a possibility for me.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry that was not clear.
No,
but
no,
thank you-
it's-
Thank you
it's
for the,
good.
for
It's
the
good, it's
asking the
good.
clarifying questions.
Good.
And I know, like you said, there are talks already, and that's part of our discussion too, that are happening, but also considering, with curriculum nights, considering parents that have multiple kids in multiple schools, so we would want, their ideas that let's do it this particular curriculum night. But, we have to think of those opportunities for and not for some, so we're just
Right.
looking at those and wanting it early in the school year, because, everyone's excited, everyone's getting, and we have principals who are interacting with parents to also give the word out. Here's a flyer, there's something, paper, so.
Typically, and particularly if we are driving a distance, so I'm working with a couple of districts right now that are an hour or an hour and a half away, we really try to make sure all of the focus groups are, the staff ones are during the day or after school, and the parent ones are in the evening. I live very close, and so I mentioned this already to Shannon, I can come a couple of different evenings also for those parent ones.
I have a couple questions. On the focus groups, will there be separate focus groups, parents and staff?
Yes.
Okay.
So generally, the staff ones are during the day or after school. So something's incorporated into the day, or if it's a later start school and they already have an hour designated before school. Generally, the staff ones are during the day. In larger districts, sometimes we're asked, could you do the administrative or directors and or leadership? Could you do that group separately? And yes, we can. So that's, sometimes people just say, just do it by school, and anyone in that school comes, or we're just gonna have a couple of different opportunities, invite people to come, but would you do administrators and directors and leaders separate? We can do any and all of that. And then generally then, the parent ones are in the evening. And again, whatever times and locations you think will be most appealing. We tend to not get a lot of people, but the ones who come really appreciate the opportunity and have a lot to say and a lot to offer. I was going to say something else about that. And we don't screen. Sometimes I may be a teacher and a parent. So I'm part of the focus group for the staff, but I also want to come to the evening one.
Yeah, as long as we'll be able to see that this is like staff,
Yes,
feedback
response
and
versus parent community.
And same jam on the
Yes.
survey. So we had a separate link for board members. So I'm assuming that's so that you can say this is,
Yes.
the board characteristics,
Yes.
the parent characteristics / community characteristics.
Yes.
Has the staff gotten a survey link so we can see staff? And when I say staff, I mean support staff and certified staff as well.
Yes, so there are two surveys. One is just board, and one is staff, parents, community, but they indicate what stakeholder group they are in. And so staff would be, could be support staff or a teacher. And those results are disaggregated by those groups.
Awesome. And then, this is a little bit side notey, but I was just thinking forward to like getting interview dates on the books, or for the board members at least to start like doodle polling about interview dates, because I know thinking forward, we're coming into a busy season.
Absolutely.
For everybody. So the sooner we can get those dates booked off for those of us who need to, make different plans as work and kids and all of that stuff is concerned, maybe the board needs to start talking about that. But, and then the other piece on the survey, and I just want to kind of hook onto what Carlos said about getting it out there, right? I haven't seen it amplified like in the PTO groups. I haven't seen it amplified in like the graduation year groups, which are also run by the PTO, at least at the younger grades. And I want to make sure that we amplify it in a way that is not only digital. So I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on Instagram. Not everybody's on Instagram, not everybody's on Facebook. And maybe that's like a QR code in like a little, handout for all the families at back to school night on
The night before
Monday.
it's due.
6 days back to school night, right? Like a little QR code that we can scan and go straight to the survey. Something that is just very, very easily approachable for all of us. That's not only digital, because I do think it's incredibly important. This is the beginning of this process, and we do not want to be at 1%, of the community. And that other, I don't know how we do this, but getting the community
Right.
feedback, not just
Thank you.
not just parents. The community pays their taxes, which pay for everybody in the school district, and it is not just the parents, the current parents,
Right.
that should have this feedback. So how do we get, or can we focus, I should say, more on that piece of it? Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, and is very important for the reasons you said. They're taxpayers, they're invested in this community in many ways. And usually a district has the ways that they connect with community groups. So sometimes the superintendent is part of Rotary or Chamber, or there are business partners that that schools are connected with, groups, retired folks who come in and read or serve as mentors. And so those community, your community leadership, mayor, council members, those kinds of folks. So no two school districts are alike in who or how they connect with in the community and how they reach those folks with information, but you know how you do it for this community. So because you can put it on your website, but if someone doesn't go to your website, how do they know?
I've certainly seen in all the PTO groups, I've searched the website, or where do I find this thing? Or,
That's
so the
the
first
first
thing.
thing that's on the website.
So that's what I would recommend,
Okay.
are all of those kinds of community groups that you've worked with on grants, sometimes the 21st Century After School, or whatever. There's just so many ways and avenues and projects that you are already interacting with community groups or businesses with. You reach out to them.
Okay.
We really want your input and your feedback. It's a short survey. Here's the link.
So then I'm specifically thinking of Amy, right? And
Yeah.
her commitment to the community and being,
Sure.
is it the Westmont First group that she's on?
Yes.
But also, Village Hall and how we can work with, maybe they can mention it during the Village Hall meetings, and if we need to extend it by a day, because I just think the 16th is the day before school starts, right?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Because
That
maybe.
is not a problem
I'm
in the
literally
least.
even thinking car line, QR codes in every single staff's hand at car line. Don't forget to fill out the survey today. Today's the last, right? Just a reel to make sure that we can get as many as we can.
I'm going to say even a day or two would still give me time.
Okay.
So yes, that is not a problem. I appreciate you asking and brainstorming ways to
And we were
get that out.
were we grabbing email addresses with that information with the surveys so that we can then also be able to blast them out info about?
I don't believe that we report out email. I don't think that we give email information. I would have to check on the back end if they're capturing those. I'm guessing that they are, but there's also, the reason we don't give those out is there's an expectation of privacy for someone filling that out. So, but I think you can say when you extend the invitation and give the link, say, please, for those who are interested, please stay up to date with the process and then tell where that update's going to be. And usually it will be on kind of front and center on a district's website. Here's the timeline and here's where we are right now, kind of highlighting where we are, what's happening. And even saying when you send those out to community members, when the board gets down to the semifinalists, we'll be having an opportunity for folks, because we'll be having the same conversation when we get to that point where I believe we are going to be facilitating stakeholders interacting with those semifinalists. And it's the same kind of thing. We'll send out an invitation, and for that, we do need to know exactly who they are, their name, their email address, what questions they're submitting, because I need to be able to communicate with them information.
Okay.
Great questions. Thank you so much. Anything else?
I guess I have a question for Kevin. Can we use like how we get phone calls? Can we remind people via phone calls, like automated?
Like a phone blast?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can,
The text,
through,
the text phone
text,
call duo
yeah.
through
combo.
Parent Link, we do that.
That's a good idea.
Then I want to piggyback on that with, if a QR code were to come up, is it something we can get to the library and have posted up? Because I know there are parts of our community that don't have personal computers, and they do go to the library for that, and that would not notice otherwise if they don't watch the meetings and that.
Yeah, we can get that to the library.
On that note, I wanted to mention something that I've seen done for this type, but also other types of surveys, is, and it works really well, especially this time of year when you're inviting parents in to back to school night, curriculum night, meet the teacher night, what have you, is to have a bank of iPads or tablets or laptops available. And even have, I know you don't want them right by the computer, but a little refreshment area, so you get your refreshment area, and then someone facilitating and saying, hey, there's a survey, it's in English, it's in Spanish, just takes a couple of minutes, do you want to come over here, use our device and fill it out right here while you have them at school.
And also another avenue, not huge, but it's something, at our table at the, how many more cruising nights do we have? Is it one more?
This will be our last one that
Just
we
a-
attend.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
once we start the school year, it
Yeah.
gets tough to get out there, but so this Thursday will be our last one.
Okay. And if, at least the QR code and the posting, that's there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the QR code is so easy, just like the bang and,
Yep.
just give us
Give a
your intro.
URL, make a QR code, print a bunch of them, you're done.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we talked about working the PTO, yes, helping the PTO, Amy, and seeing some other avenues for getting it out, more emails, texts, phone calls, all that good stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
And also thinking about the board themselves with dates. Looking
Yeah.
at your calendar.
Yes, when you
potential.
mentioned that, I think it was you, Leah, that mentioned that, and you really almost can't start thinking about that too soon. So typically, the slate that is brought forward is 6 candidates. Occasionally, it will be 1 or 2 more, and if so, there's a reason, and I will have communicated with you to let you know that reason. And occasionally, it's 1 or 2 less. Not very often, but once in a while, it will be 1 less, and maybe there was someone that looked like a great fit, but shortly before I was going to bring the slate to you, they took a job elsewhere. And so I will look to see if there's someone else really excellent to move into that, but I'm not just going to fill a spot to be filling a spot if it doesn't look like a really strongly viable candidate. So at any rate, that's why we say generally it's 6 candidates. And so obviously there's a variety of ways to plan interviews, thoughtful interviews for 6 people. And sometimes a board will find 2 nights and do 3 interviews each night with a break between to clear their heads, or 3 nights with 2 per evening. And occasionally people's schedules get so difficult to coordinate that I have seen boards do all of them on a Saturday, or typically it's a Saturday, but across a day, and do 3, take a break, lunch break, and do 3 more. There really isn't a right or wrong way, it's what works for you.
And so we're talking early November, yes, for initial interviews, that's where we're talking about dates, yeah?
That is correct, because when we bring the slate to you on October 25th, we will have, typically when I bring that slate, I will bring a schedule of first round interviews. I schedule them for you. So by the middle of October, so you could plan them for just a few days after that October 25th. So October 26th, 27th, I don't know what day of the week that lands on, you could do your first one then. By at least a 1 week prior to me bringing the slate to you, I would need to know those dates and times because I schedule those for you.
And this is a question for us as a group. Do we want to just put this on an agenda for September and or set some dates, or what's the best way? Because
I mean, I think we should pick dates, before the next board meeting, honestly. That's like early November, like that's starting to get real crazy.
And then we have our conference that month
We have
too.
a conference.
I can work with Patricia on her calendar as well, and then do like a doodle poll with possible
Great,
dates
perfect.
and times.
I think the issue is just let's get it
See
get it done.
what people can
Yeah.
lock in.
And I'm glad you said that, Kevin, because that jogged my memory on something else. Typically, the consultant is not present and involved in those first round interviews. We will be giving you a lot of excellent information. You can call it a mini workshop or an orientation or what have you. And I was talking with Shannon about this earlier. It can be done the night that I bring the slate, or it can be done at a previous meeting, but it will be in closed session. Obviously, I give the names in closed session, but also in closed session, we have really important information about first round interviews, second round interviews, protocols, do's, don'ts, questions, forms, rubrics to complete for each candidate. And so we'll be providing all of that prior to your interviews. Therefore, we typically are not present in the interview unless there is a request for that, and there's a valid reason and you want me in those interviews, we can talk about that, and that's doable.
And just so you guys know, which may be helpful, we have 3 weeks from the time that slate is given on October 25th until our next meeting. So we have a good chunk of time.
Is that October 25th a scheduled meeting
Yes.
already? Okay.
Yes.
And
So
the
we need
next
to,
one after that is November 15th.
so we need to plan, or ideally, we should plan that October 5th closed session is long for you guys to be in, or after closed, or,
And again, everybody's schedule can be busy, but you can also have a special board meeting for that purpose as well. So that could be the
Yeah.
focus of that meeting.
yeah.
I'm gonna just check and say something. Did you say you have a board meeting on October 5th?
25th.
No, 25th.
Yeah, 25th, I bring the slate. When is your other October meeting?
It is October 11th.
11th? I could be back for that. So I'm just saying that one possibility would be, I think we would obviously have the focus groups done by then. I could bring the focus group results. That would be an open session, but that same night I could do that orientation about the interviews, just mentioning that as a possibility. You and I were talking about that before. Both of those could be done on the 11th from my perspective.
And then we could follow up also on the 25th. To me, that feels very kind of natural of like doing the 11th focus group, introduction, all of those pieces. And then we get the slate on the 25th. And then if anybody has additional questions after the 11th
Exactly.
that, came up, we can hit them on the 25th.
Yeah, what's nice about that, particularly if you are wanting to schedule interviews fairly soon after the 25th, when I bring the slate, if I'm just giving you the information that evening, there's a lot of information, and you're going to need some time to talk about questions and format and protocols and the flow and just a variety of things. So from my perspective, it does not make a difference. From me thinking about your ease and being prepared and being comfortable and not feeling rushed, I like the idea of the 11th being the focus group results and what I'm going to call, the interview protocols, and then just the slate with any follow-up questions on the 25th, and also that night I would bring the interview schedule. Great question. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I know it's a lot, but you obviously know what an important undertaking it is. Anything else I can answer at this time? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments about this, okay, we'll move on to our next discussion item, sex education legislation.
So with regards to the sex education legislation, I did a board memo, and this is kind of where the district is at. Again, there are mandated unit of studies that schools are required to teach, and that there's a whole gamut of mandated units that span everything from different ethnic groups' contributions to history, to gender, to sexual orientation in terms of their contributions and so forth. But there's also, for the sexual health, there's also mandated units of studies. Those are separate from the national sex standards. So when districts are opting in and opting out, you have to teach the mandated units. That's what we've always taught. So nothing changes there with teaching the mandated units. When it comes to the national standards and deciding to adopt those or not, the flexibility school districts have is this school year, 2022-2023, districts can do what they've been doing, teaching the mandated units like they always have, and take the time to really take a look at those standards, take a look at their own curriculum and seeing if there are some cases they're aligned, some cases maybe not. The other advantage we have as a unit district, although part of the issue is we still haven't gotten a lot of clarification or direction from the State Board of Ed. But one of the possibilities is, as a unit school district, is it possible that some of those standards are taught at different age groups and different grades than possibly what is currently in place. And so, some of the concern about how young students are being exposed to certain topics, there may be that flexibility. Well, as a unit district, you can address that standard later. You don't necessarily have to do it at that moment. So basically, this school year, nothing's changing for our school district. We are teaching mandated units like we are required to, like we always have. We are going to take a look at the national sex standards and take a look at our curriculum, and then make a determination whether or not going forward we're going to adopt those standards, or if we're going to just continue doing what we've always done and do the mandated units.
So no changes for this school year.
Correct.
From previous school years.
Correct.
But we get a chance to review. And when we review it, is that something that we need to approve as a board? Does that come to us as a board approval?
That is up to the board. Typically what happens is, as far as curriculum, the board directs the superintendent to implement curriculum and standards. But if on a topic of this nature, if the board wants to weigh in on it, then later on in the spring, that could be a topic, and then there could be board action on it.
So I feel like, thank you for the memo. Thank you for the clarification too. I'm looking at the last 3 sentences of the memo that talk about how parents can always review the curriculum and materials. Parents always have the option to have their child opt out of field trips or topics, and then parents can contact their child's school. I appreciate that. I think given the current time that we're living in, and the amount of dialogue that's happening out there about this topic, wherever people feel about it, however people feel about it, I just think it could go a long way to put like a little 1-pager or something together to kind of demystify the whole what is already happening. What are the mandated units by grade level? What is happening, because I think what I'm hearing is there's a perception that a tremendous amount of time, instructional time, is being used for this, and I'm not sure that that's the case either.
No, that's not
and
the
so I
case.
think, again, it just comes back to something we often have to work on, which is just transparency, because there's a disconnect between what's actually happening and what's perceived to be happening. So I think the sooner we can get something like that put together and publicized on our website and however else, I think the better. I think also an important piece of that is just including some of the research about, about sex education and all of that in general. Like what's been proven, what's been researched, why are we doing this? Why are we doing the mandated units? What's been proven about how those are beneficial for students? So I think it just comes back to our age-old issue of communication,
Sure.
really.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same kind of, it would be nice to just see at kindergarten, this is what we're teaching, this is how much time it takes. First grade, because I have younger students, and so I know what those are, but I'm not going to remember what that is when my kids are in 5th grade, or when my kids are out of the district. I'm not necessarily going to have that. So having that kind of one pager, and then also down the line, if we decide to make changes to it for next year, it's very easy to say like, this piece we'd like to actually see here, and so we can kind of compare and contrast. That would be very helpful. Great idea.
Or like, this is the tool or material we used, here's how it's going to maybe be updated now that we're using these standards. And so I think it's just, I appreciate they can always reach out if they want to, and they still can, but I think given the circumstances, we need to just be proactive and put it out there.
Sure. And I can talk to Nadine Norris about putting that together, and we can get that on our website.
Just a couple of things to be explicit about, because we're going to have an action item here about approving policies, and within the conversation about the sex education legislation. Tonight, when we vote on the policies, I think in your memo on sex education legislation, it mentions 6.6 in the policies. Are we voting on any changes to 6.6 tonight?
The only changes to 660 recommended by press are any legislative changes to mandated units of study. The policy itself does not call for the adoption of the national sex education standards.
So we're not voting, when we vote on,
Right.
because we're going to vote on all of this all at once, and it's a lot. So specifically calling out 660.
Right.
There is no adoption of national standards
Correct.
in 660.
Right.
Right. And secondarily, we're not voting to increment the time allotted to sex education at any grade level in this evening, are we?
No.
All right, so good, thanks.
I have a general question just with, just for clarification from you, Kevin. When they're talking about opting out or opting in, it's confusing that their recommendations haven't been given.
Right.
Or shared from the state board. So what are they opting out of?
Right, it's whether or not the school districts are going to adopt the national sex education standards for this school year. And so some school districts are, and I think, I could be wrong, I think many of them are high school districts. So it's a little bit different, when you're talking about high school age students versus when you're in unit district. So I think some of the high school districts are opting to adopt those standards and to teach those standards. The opt-out is, again, you can't opt out of the mandated units. So we're not opting out of that. It's just that you're not, right now, we're not going to be teaching the national sex education standards. We're going to take a look at the standards, look at our curriculum, and we can use 22, 23 for that purpose. There's also, though, I think some of the confusion as well is, and this is true of any of the mandated units that we have as part of our curriculum, parents always have the opportunity to review the curriculum, and they can have their child opt out of certain portions of it. So, historically, one of the prime examples has been dissection. In a biology class, a child doesn't want to dissect a frog, so the parent can have their child opt out of that, activity. So that's also part of, parents have the option of having children opt out of, even right now, I still call it the Robert Crown Center. It's changed, but even now, the elementary schools send out information to parents. Hey, just so you know, in 2 weeks, fifth grade's taking a field trip to the Robert Crown Center. They're going to learn about puberty and other topics. Here's an outline of what's going to be covered. Please contact us if you do not want your child to attend. So there's always been that option to opt out.
I just like to comment that it's hard. I do like to see the examples of what's happening around us, but we have to realize that we are different than other districts, and we have a uniqueness about us. So using the excuse that, well, someone else did it this way is not reason enough. So I like that we will examine different topics and see as a district and as a board if we have issues with anything or we want movement or something, improvement upon our curriculum. That's always something that we should do. So I like that, that's our plan.
I just gonna put my 2 cents in. I always appreciate the fact that there is that opt-out option. We're giving knowledge to the public, and it's not being required. If it was required, then I think there would be a problem. When parents see it, it's there. You don't like it, you pull your student from it. That is the most important part, is that they can opt out. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to the third topic, TCD DAOES joint agreement.
And so one of the action items for the board is to approve the intergovernmental agreement. Our students at the high school attend the Technology Center of DuPage, but the board, similar to Board of Education, is DAOS, to DuPage Occupational Education System. And each district has a representative. I serve on the board as our representative. And periodically, the intergovernmental agreement needs to be amended and changed. And one of the things that the language called for was, in the event that TCD were to ever dissolve, which I don't anticipate that happening, but there was a question of, okay, what happens to the assets of the building, land, equipment, all those things. And so there was language in the agreement, but the agreement only referenced the initial 8 original school districts that were part of TCD when originally formed. 201 was one of those. And so at that time in 1980, and then in 1986 is when they expanded to 14 districts. And so at that time, the value of the building and assets was $20 million. And so the agreement that was reached is that initial investment, those 8 schools made an initial investment into TCD, that $20 million would be divided up amongst the 8 original school districts based upon your initial investment. And then at the time that the district dissolves, or the technology center dissolves, if it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever, there would be another assessment done of the building and property. And obviously there will be a new value above the 20 million. And so the remaining, that's 60 million, that 40 million then would be divided among the 14 member districts. And so that's really the only significant change in the intergovernmental agreement. And so the board is being asked to, it was approved by the DAOS board, we all voted for the approval, but now each individual district has to also vote to approve the intergovernmental agreement.
Any other questions or comments? Right. We'll move to item 4, policy first reading, as the stated policy numbers in our agenda.
And actually, this is our second reading. So there's error, apologize for. But second reading, and one of the things that, as the board was reviewing the policies for the first reading that came to our attention, is that if the board remembers, I think about 2 years ago, I think it was, the term of office, the officer's term was changed from 2 years to 1 year. And so anytime a policy references the length of term of office, ours will reflect 1 year. And so those changes will be made to any of these policies that reference the length of the term of office. But that's just so that the board knows that when we approve these policy changes, that will be reflected when those are posted on our website, that our term of office is 1 year.
Any questions or comments about policies? Okay, we'll move along to our action items on the same note. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the listed policies as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Ms. Steckity?
Yes.
Ms. Hoover?
Yes.
Mr. Marin?
Yes.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number 2, approval of TCD DAOES joint agreement. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the TCD DAOES joint agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Ms. Steckity?
Yes.
Ms. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Mr. Marin?
Yes.
And we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Probably depending upon who you are, parents, I'm sure, are going to be happy with this announcement, but students will be unhappy. Next week, we open school year. Monday, August 15th, our staff will report. The 15th and 16th will be Institute days. Students do not report. And then the first day of student attendance is Wednesday, August 17th. And if a family still has not registered their child, they were out of town, they just haven't been able to do it, if they contact their child's school, the school office will make sure to get them registered in time. But again, we're excited to start a new school year, and we look forward to our students on Wednesday, August 17th.
Are there any board reports?
I just had two things that I thought of during the meeting. We previously, in the consent agenda, approved the hazardous crossing. And so I just wanted to bring up or re-bring up that crossing at Napier and Washington for Miller. Now that grade level centers have been the lay of the land, what we're doing for that crossing and how we're working with the city to, at the very least, get it marked much better as a crossing, because you are coming like up a hill, going pretty fast there, and that's the youngest kids. And I know that I've never seen a first or a kindergartner or a first grader walk to school alone. They're not allowed, but it's still, we have a lot of signage up at the Manning crossing on Napier. So what we need to do for the south one and how we can work with the city for that. And then the other thing was just that we have on our next meeting agenda or the one after, just a review on our plans for that snow day, remote day situation, since we didn't get a chance last winter to test out our one remote day, what our plan is for this winter, so that parents can be clear early in the year.
Right.
Any other reports? I'd just like to put on everyone's radar about this year, and just stay tuned for announcements as we celebrate our anniversary as a district. So it's exciting. The band and Ms. Biederman is working really hard with her students, so it should be exciting. Homecoming is?
October 7th.
Is that the first kind of celebration at this point?
We're, well, we're going to do something with the staff next Monday.
Oh,
We've got pictures of our current employees who graduated from 201. So we'll have their picture as graduates and see if people can figure out who they are. So we're going to do that. We have pillows for all of our staff as well, and board, that we'll be handing out. And then homecoming will probably be the next big thing that we do.
okay. Great. We don't have any other public comment, so we'll move to future meetings and events as we think about dates for getting surveys out. Manning New Family Orientation, August 11th, 6 p.m. at Manning. Manning and Miller Supply Drop-Off, August 15th, 4 to 5:30 p.m., Manning and Miller. Elementary Family Fun Night, bring your own meal, August 15th, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Ty Warner Park. I guess, I'm not sure if there are any PTO meetings within that, but we'll try to get that publicized. The first day of student attendance, again, is August 17th, and it's a PLC day. And please stay tuned for those dismissal times. Preschool screening is by appointment only, August 19th, 2022 at South School. And then our next CUSD 201 school board meeting is August 23rd, 6 p.m. here at Westmont Village Hall. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion to re-enter closed session to discuss personnel issues and collective bargaining.
So moved.
Second.
All those approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Also to the public, there will be no action after we close, so I just want to make that present that we will adjourn right after closed session.